We're going to start in Job chapter 4 today. So, quick recap. Anybody remember what we covered last week? What happened to him? Everything. What did he lose? Family, his fortune, health. He's been beaten down. Why did he lose it? For no other reason than God's sovereignty. That's what we need. That's what we're getting out of this book. And really, it was God who initiated the whole deal, not even Job. Because Satan was out there just looking for something, and God goes, here's Job. How would you like that if God said, here's, insert your name? You know, it's a pretty big deal. And it not only, as what we also learned, it not only affected Job, who else did it affect? His wife. We tend to leave her out of the equation. But you can kind of understand her bitterness and the issues that she was dealing with her husband. You know, and especially because it's easy to point fingers at them saying, you know, why are you acting like this? But I mean, they have this understanding, and we actually have this too because it's taught in churches today, that if you do good, God will bless you. And if you do bad, God will punish you. And that is nowhere in Scripture. Okay, so having that misunderstanding will actually give you a wrong sense of who God is. And what we're going to find out as we read through these friends who have put them on the board, it really shows who they thought God was and what their relationship was all about with Him. And so how we respond to things in our life is a direct reflection on how you view God. And that's a pretty tough one to say, but it's true. So I think that's one of the big key things that we get out of here is really hopefully we get an introspective of, am I keeping God in this little bitty box of mine and I got to make sure He fits and stays in there? Or do I let Him out and be God like He's supposed to be in my life? And at that point then it becomes a little, I'm not saying it's easy, it becomes a little easier because He's God. Okay? So we're going to get to see some of those. Good morning. So we're going to get to see some interactions. We're getting into some. It always makes me laugh, and I said this last week, that we call these three guys, friends. You know, the way they're acting towards them, I'm like, really? That's a friend of yours? Maybe we need to check our friends out a little bit more. But that's a whole nother topic for us to cover too. So what I did was I put the three guys up here that we're going to cover over the next several weeks. We're going to cover Eliphaz. And what you're going to find is one speaks, Job responds, one speaks, Job responds, so forth, and it regurgitates itself 3 times. Okay? What we find is Eliphaz, he's a little more on the restraint side. It doesn't seem like it, but he actually is. He's a little more courteous. He has a specific reason as to what he's focusing on, like the distance between God and man. Well, you must have done something kind of in that aspect. He's basing his speech on experience. And that's kind of where he's coming from. And then he's viewed life as a mystic, if you really want to kind of boil it down to Eliphaz. Then we're going to get to Bildad. God is just and great, which is a great thing to say. Just how he says it is probably not the best way of doing it. But he's more direct, less courteous. He bases his arguments on tradition. This can be ugly too. Okay? Tradition is good, but sometimes it can be bad. And then he's viewed life as an attorney. Bad. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. And then you get to Zophar. Now, what's interesting about Zophar, I think he only, I think it's twice. He doesn't respond a third time. And I think it's because Job maybe put him in his place. We'll get to that. Okay. But he stresses God's inscrutability. So, you know, it's funny to me when we get to him. But he's blunt and brutal. And I think Job responds back to him that way. He speaks more in assumptions and intuition, which is not good. And he was more of a dogmatist. I kind of just give you an idea of who these characters are before we go in there. We are probably going to go through the next 28 chapters pretty quickly. Because, I mean, we don't want to spend a lot of time in this. Okay? these are not verses that you typically want to memorize and quote and use. Okay? God even speaks to who these three friends are. And if God views them a certain way, then we just need to be very careful. But there are some things that we can glean from it. Okay, so if we go fast, that's why. And it was funny. One of the people that I used to listen to a lot, Chuck Missler, he was very detailed, breaks everything down verse by verse. And I said, I've never heard him on Job. So I pulled him up today or this week. And it was funny because he normally does one chapter a week per thing. I pull it up and it said Job 4 through 28 was one hour video. And I was like, whoa, was it even he went through this stuff pretty quickly. So where we're going to spend most of our time is when God speaks, like I mentioned last time, because that's the important piece of it, okay? But what's funny is there are things that people want to quote out of these friends, and we got to be very careful about that, okay? So that's kind of a summary. Let's get into this. I've actually prepared through chapter 7, but I doubt we'll get it. Chapter 4, Eliphaz begins to speak. Who read it? Who read ahead of time? Was there anything that stuck out to you or that you had some questions on? Because like I said, I'm not going to read through every bit of this. I thought he started off pretty good when I just started reading. He starts off with saying, if someone should attempt a word with you, will you be impatient? But who can refrain from speaking? Look, you have instructed many. You have strengthened feeble hands. Your words have supported those who stumbled. You have strengthened the knees that gave way. Now the same thing comes to you and you're discouraged. So he actually acknowledges all the good that Job had done, which I thought was a great start. I'm like, well, couldn't you just keep going with it? Kind of a deal. But he's basing this on, it's like, you've done all of this encouraging and helping other people. Why are you not using your own words to help you out? Kind of a deal. And I thought, I was like, wow, that's actually pretty good. Was it the best thing to say? Probably not, but there's some truth in that. So I like what you said on that. So he kind of is criticizing Job for not encouraging himself. But let me tell you, that's hard to do. When you're in a state of depression or that kind of self-low, it's hard to pull yourself out of it. Anybody speak on that? Have you seen that in your family or yourselves? Because it really is. It's funny because over the last several weeks, I've been doing a lot of research on like comforting words and how do you talk to people who've lost someone and those kind of things. And it really, they says, and it gave all these even scripture verses that people tend to use to comfort people that actually do harm. So we can even use the Bible in a way that actually hurts them more or brings them no relief. Or God's in control. God, look, we know that. That doesn't help me.
Doesn't make it hurt.
So I think some of the things I hear, even though it's true and probably a good statement, sometimes you just need to shut up as people. And that's why I said last week, some of the best things these friends did, they sat silent for 7 days just to be with him. So we get on to the kind of the second part in 7, and he says, he goes, call to mind now whoever being innocent ever perished. So he's going to that whole aspect. Bad people will lose. Good people are going to be okay. And before we start off, we're going to fast forward just a little bit. Somebody pull up Job 38. Vicky, pull up Job 38 for me. Somebody pull up Job 42. I'm putting these up here. 38:2 and then 42:7. Dory, so go ahead and read that.
Who is this that darkens my counsel with words without knowledge?
Go ahead.
After the Lord had finished speaking to Job, he said to Eliphaz the Temanite, I am angry with you and your two friends, for you have not spoken the truth about me, as my servant Job has.
Okay, I fast forward a little bit because this is God speaking about these friends. And this is why I'm backing it up saying we need to be very careful on utilizing or using anything these guys say. God spoke against them. And he was actually upset with him because of this. Okay? So that's what I'm basing this on. So be careful quoting what they say. But you, Kyle, you were saying something that...
Well, I guess when I was comparing a little bit the things where, they talked about people that had sins in their life that was passed down into their families. That was false. I mean, that's kind of what he's saying. What did you do in your life that's caused this to happen to you?
John 9, 1 and 2. As he was passing by, he saw a man blind from birth. This is Jesus. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? So that idea, to your point, was passed down, and it never really stopped, kind of a thing. And they got it wrong. He's like, nobody did.
It can make Christians look the other way, like their life is so good, and I think it can keep them like mad at God because like maybe something's happened. They're very good, and something doesn't happen to someone who does bad things. It's like they see people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely it does. Yeah.
They make people like mad at God, and maybe keeps them away from church or views life completely wrong because someone that's doing sinful things looks so successful and has money and has all this stuff, but I'm here good going to church and all these things happen to me. Like how it could really make somebody bitter.
Yeah. No, I mean, but you're absolutely right. But and there's even misconceptions that churches are teaching today, that God he blesses those, like if you have a lot of money, it's because of God's blessing. Like that is so not true. Just because you have does not mean God's the one blessing you. And if we have that mentality, that will definitely put us in that state of reference to go, well, how come I'm not? I'm the one going to church. I'm the one worshiping and reading my Bible every day and trying to live for God. How come he hasn't done that for me? Like, you have about this big a picture of God. And we talked about last week, Esau. Esau was blessed abundantly, but he was cursed. So be careful on how we are not meant to go view other people in what's going on in their lives on what God's doing. We don't have a clue what God is doing. Now, here's what's interesting to me. We get into kind of this other second part. It's starting in chapter 12. He says, now a word was stealthily brought to me, and my ear caught a whisper of it in the troubling thoughts of the dreams in the night when a deep sleep falls on me. So Eliphaz has this vision that he believes is from God, that he's supposed to be sharing with Job. But not once does he say it was from God. I just had a vision, and this is what I should share. Be very careful. If you don't know if it's from God, keep your mouth shut. Or if somebody doesn't know, we need to be very careful on who we're receiving information from too. If you're going to someone who doesn't know God and they're going to give you wisdom, good luck. If it is what? You pay attention. I mean, I think if somebody speaks a word into you saying that God has shared with them some information, we're to take it, and I think we're to go pray about it. And we're to seek God on it ourselves. He will confirm what he has done with somebody else. We are not to just take it as truth. Because let me tell you, Satan will do a great job on mimicking God. He's done a lot, and we read in Revelation he does it. He is.
I think also we have to be careful because they are a human. Not that God does not speak to us, but we can also get stuff not quite right because we're not God.
Exactly.
So I think when we hear
sure.
things, testing it against his word, and like you said, praying about it and seeing what God says to us, I think God can certainly use people, but I just think we have to be careful with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So then he also goes on to say, 14, he goes, a deep sleep fell on me, dread gripped me and trembling, which made all my bones shake. Probably not from God. I'm going to start there. And it says in 15, in some different translations will say this differently. It says, then a breath of air passes by my face. The King James Version said, a spirit passed before my face. And it makes my hair and my flesh stand up. So I would immediately have gone, hold on, we're done. Yeah, what you have to say, I don't want to hear it. Just because the spirit passed for you and you were that afraid, Because I don't know. Anytime that I've seen God move, or speak to somebody in the spirit format like that where somebody is afraid, what's typically the next line? Do not be afraid. Because they want them to know this is okay. If we don't get that, something else is wrong. Have you ever had a moment where, and I'm just kind of getting off the thing here, where just something just did not feel right? I've had that in my house. And I don't like it. And I knew it wasn't from God. So we need to be very careful on these things. Is a mortal man righteous before God, or a man pure before his Creator? If God puts no trust in his servants and attributes folly to his angels, how much more of those who live in houses of clay, whose foundation is in the dust, who are crushed like a moth? He's trying to put this distinction between the righteous and the wicked, and that the righteous are never fully perfect. So why do you think that? I mean, it's a very odd thing that he's saying here, I think, to Job. But the bigger thing is he's offering no comfort whatsoever to Job. Anything else in that? So I think in 1721, I think he's trying to represent God, but he's not doing a very good job of it. He's showing God kind of more of as an unconcerned with people because of the lowliness of them. He's way off base. So we kind of get an idea of his relationship with God, in my opinion, on his views. So let's go to chapter 5. So call now. Is there anyone who will answer you? To which of the holy ones will turn? For wrath kills the foolish person, and anger slays the silly one. It's futile to pray. No one's going to hear you. So just be quiet. That's really what he's saying here. Okay? His children are far from safety, and they are crushed at the place where judgment is rendered, nor is there anyone to deliver them. So Job's, he's really kind of even taking it one step further, almost, I think, as a dig. He's saying, look, your sins were passed down to your kids' sins, which is probably why they died. Yeah, so bad. But that's comforting, right? But he's trying to kind of get Job to think about what sin he is truly. And Job's going to ask him a question when this is all done, which is interesting. He goes, for evil does not come up from the dust, nor does trouble spring up from the ground, but people are born to trouble, as surely as the sparks fly upward. Probably very true, but not in the sense of what's going on, okay? So he can use some truths in the wrong sense. And we do that all the time with verses. All the time. I think one of the best quotes, and I've got on my coffee cup, what is it? It's, I can do all things through a verse out of context. And it's true. Blessings for the one who seeks God is this next section. It says, starting in verse 8, it says, but as for me, I would seek God, and to God I would set forth my case. Great truth. Good place to go. Okay, go to God. If it was me, I would just go to God. Hey, this is what I would do, kind of a deal. Yeah, it's good. Okay, starting off good. And it's, pleading your case, and that kind of made me stop and laugh, because what kind of case do we really have? God's the one in control. God can do whatever he wants to do. And we're going to get to that at some point in this book. And God's going to go, this is my doing. You let me do what I'm supposed to be doing. Now, and I think it's also key to note that there are times, though, we have seen in Scripture where people have talked to God about changing things or doing something a little differently. And God has allowed that to happen, but that's not the norm kind of a thing.
So you're getting into a point about tradition. I think here in our Western culture, is that when you look at Christ, God is a holy and just God, and we know that, but He's got to punish our sin. And I think that's what we don't understand, where the significance of where Jesus came into being into place, that He died for us. And when we pause and think about that, because I mean, individually, when you think about that, Jesus did not have to die. He chose to die, for us. But the sin had to be punished. But Western culture teaches it's okay, we'll let slide this time. And we were bombarded with that almost every single day. It's okay. And I think that goes back to some of our thoughts and how we think, regarding how we give advice and what we do and things like that. Sometimes I think we more like Bildad, and I get scary because I mean, like in prison ministry, I can't tell you how many people think God spoke to them and they, this is the right way, and you're going, what are you talking about? But the tradition, I think, is we need to be very careful with that and how we're taught outside what this Bible teaches us.
Yeah, that's good.
To get in the habit of saying, is this from God? Like when something happens or something, is it from God?
Yeah, or God allowed it. Why? Because that's another question, and that's what we covered last week is, I think one of the big things is God allows everything to come into our lives, no matter what it is. The question is why, and sometimes we're to stop and go, what am I supposed to learn from this, or what am I supposed to get from this?
Well, I think that remembrance that everything we go through is filtered through His hand. Otherwise He's not in control. If some things are and some things aren't, then God's not sovereign.
Right.
So we have to trust, and that goes back to knowing who God is. He loves us, and we have to know that it's for our good. Even the incredibly tough things, I have to be able to look back, or that's hopeless.
Right.
Who is this God then? What's the big deal?
Yeah.
If I can't look back and know, okay, Lord, there's a reason, there is a plan, there is a purpose why I'm going through this, and really ultimately for us to be more like Him. I think, He's working to shave off all the yuck in our lives.
We have to accept that we may not know why.
There
In this
exactly may not be a reason that we can see. I know there is a reason, but I may not be able to put words to it.
Job,
The
Right.
simplest terms I heard of him this week is God is always right and He is always good.
it's the truth. And through all of this, Job never once understood what was going on behind the scenes.
Right.
It was never told to him.
Here's a quote
We got the
later.
foresight of being able to say, because God told Satan, go to the one that's righteousness. He did nothing wrong.
Yeah.
Job did nothing wrong. So we knew, where it's coming from. Where his friends didn't.
Yeah, absolutely.
Later on, he tells his friends, he says, this is Job speaking, yet though he slay me, I will still serve him. I think it's one of the most powerful verses in here from Job's position.
Yeah, absolutely. Job speaks a lot of wisdom whenever he goes through this, even though it's tough and you can kind of feel his anguish and things. And we'll get into that here in just a minute. And things I will say, I think Eliphaz got a lot of things right in a sense. It's just his delivery and how he did it, and probably the timing of it all. And so I just want to, and to me, that's something that we can learn as we're trying to give comfort to other people. Be careful. Think probably 3 times before you say something. Okay? And then ask yourself, is this something that I would want shared with me in this kind of a tough time? A lot of times you'll come back and go, no. I'll just keep that to myself. But you're right. But I think y'all are right. This is all showing some aspects of who God is. God is, one of the biggest things is God is sovereign, which is what we talked about last week. What does that mean? It's a big word, sovereign. So what does it mean?
Everything.
Yeah.
He's in control of everything.
He has the full deck. He knows everything. Past, present, future.
Okay.
Everything.
God knows everything. He's in control of everything. And by his word, we know that everything is working according to our good. So no matter what is going on in this world and in our lives, those are the truths that we need to hold on to. And that's kind of what Job is holding on to. I think Job is really expressing his heart, and we'll get into that in just a second. But I don't think he ever really loses the aspect of God's sovereignty. Okay? And that's what we need to understand when we go through tough times in life. We're not promised good all the time.
It's kind of like that coach that you got sick and tired of hearing of. Yell at you, scream at you, and then at the end of the season, it's like, wow, we've become a pretty good ball team. It was a discipline.
Yeah. It's what makes you better. It's what makes you harder and stronger. That's why I love that verse, and it goes through the process of why we go through it. So let me ask that. So what are some reasons for Christians to experience suffering?
So that you can comfort others.
So through experience, so you can use it. Yeah. What's any other reasons?
To draw us closer to God.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think sometimes you think you may be doing pretty good in an area until something enters your life and you realize, wow, maybe I haven't truly been leaning on the Lord. I've been leaning on my paycheck, or I've been leaning on, right. And I think those are the moments when really you do take a hard look in that, okay.
Yeah.
You really are my rock. You are the only thing that is getting me through my day. Nothing else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the last thing that I'll say is also our suffering is a way to show other people who are lost who God is and that he's real. Because how we respond in those moments speaks more volumes, I think, than anything we could ever say to them. So remember that.
We also get a testimony through it. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing I wrote down here with the biggest problem is Eliphaz assumes he knows all that is going on and he has the solution. And that is man's biggest issue, biggest problem.
That's where I think it's difficult in the sense to where there are times where God will lead you to go speak to someone. But like these gentlemen, they don't talk about, I sought the Lord, or God spoke to me and wanted me to, confront you. They never mentioned anything about how they went to the Lord first. And I think that's key for us, is if we're really feeling like the Holy Spirit's prompting us to maybe confront someone or speak to someone about the sin, that you really need to make sure that that's coming from the Lord first, before you. But, we don't do that these days. I think sometimes we err on the side of not, and we should be,
Right.
So I guess you could start out your sentence, I'm not coming here as Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar.
Kind of sense too, Ryan, that they're speaking, thinking, this could be me. They were friends that were kind of on the same line as him. And so they're going through this, they're really thinking, this could have been me, this is how I want it to go. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Because when I was thinking about that, I would go, why would they turn? I mean, if they were friends, why would they turn on him like this? And the only thing I could think of was that, I like that. And then I thought was, they don't want to be anywhere near him because I don't want to experience that. So whatever he did, I'm going to keep him away from me, kind of a deal.
Fear.
Yeah, it is. It's fear. So yes, it's very odd.
Logic is what we think. Logically, why does this happen? And there's got to be a reason. I'm a smart human. Well, human brains can only comprehend so much. Right.
And it's funny you bring up logic, because I said that Eliphaz was trying to heal Job emotionally with logic. It doesn't work. There's only one thing that you can heal someone with: love. That's it. There's no theological doctrine that'll heal somebody.
I think time sometimes too is an element of that.
Absolutely it is. Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into the Job's response in chapter 6. We probably won't get to 7. So Job responds now to Eliphaz. He goes, "Oh, if only my grief could be weighed and my misfortune laid on the scales too." So I mean, you can really tell he's really going through some tough times here. But because it is heavier than the sand of the sea, that is why my words have been wild. For the arrows of the Almighty are within me. My spirit drinks their poison. God's sudden terrors are arrayed against me. So Job is acknowledging who allowed this to happen to him. So he's on the right track in saying, God has done this to me, or God has allowed, this to happen to me. So at least his mind is in the right spot, but he's still saying, he goes, hey, this is, a lot for me to bear here. And he's just saying that his grief and misfortunes were heavier than wet sand. Wet sand's heavy, And then he goes, does the wild donkey bray when it is near grass, or does the ox bellow over its fodder? Can food that is tasteless be eaten without salt? Or is there any taste in the white of an egg? What is he saying here? I thought this was kind of some pretty good stuff. So really what Job, he appeals to the behavior of animals. If they see something that's worthy of eating, they're probably going to eat it, right? When it's near that. Or when something doesn't taste real good, or it's kind of bland, do we not add salt to it? So he's kind of comparing those things. Well, if during my suffering I can't complain or moan and do these things, he goes, don't these things go hand in hand? He goes, so why can't I do this? So he's making a case for his own grumbling or misfortune in talking about these things. Is it wrong to do that?
Yeah, it's justified, you would say.
Okay.
Oh, I can speak to that. Like when I'm having a really bad pain day, or it's been a long time, or before I had my surgery, I can remember that, like just saying, like, why me, why this, and grumbling, it hurt. I was in such agony with it. It's like I could do nothing but grumble. It was like a release to me that if I didn't say something that,
Yeah.
it's hard not to.
Yeah. So is it wrong to say that to God?
No, he wants you to be honest.
Yeah, it's honest.
Yeah, how do you not deal with that emotion? You don't bottle it up for sure.
He knows it anyway.
Yeah.
It's
He tell you to bring it all to him.
It's just not staying there.
Right.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, it's not living in that. We've got to have the point of turning and recognizing, okay, God, I trust you. But I think, not saying anything. I mean, God knows what we're thinking and what we're feeling.
Yeah, we've had several people like that have gotten divorces, unfortunately, in the last year, and you can see these things working through. They go through the first stage of what it's like, second stage. And you see those emotions they're working through, and it's been the same with just about everything involved.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, but it's just reality of it. So.
And I would always say, and if this is your plan for me, God, not to get bitter about it, not to get, I know you're bringing, and then I see him bringing solutions and people, and I can look back now and say, oh, okay, I see that.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
get it now. I didn't see the full deck. He saw the full deck, like you said, I like that.
So I think what y'all said is key. One, you can't hide anything from God. You can't hide your feelings. You can't hide what's going on in your head, the thoughts that you're having. So why not air it out? There's something about saying something out loud that's kind of therapeutic, and God knows that. That's why he wants us to pray out loud. That's why he wants us to do all, some things like that. Hear the word, not just sit in silent and read it. There's something about an audible thing. The key is, though, like what you said, you can't stay there. Once you give it to God, you got to give it to God. Okay? Sometimes he's going to answer you. Sometimes he's not. And you need to be okay with that. We all need to be okay with that. Like I've said in my men's group, no is an answer. God answers every prayer and every cry that comes out of our mouths. It's just not how we think it should be answered in our own feeble minds. So Job is actually acknowledging that as a human, that he is frail, feeble, because later on he compares himself to metal and stone. He goes, I'm not that way. As a human, I'm frail, so I'm going to do these things, and he even goes to the point of really wanting death, and he's not afraid of dying, which there are some commentaries that really have some misunderstanding of this. Job understands, because this whole idea of I think the rewards in heaven aspect weren't really taught at this point to some people's argument. So some of this stuff was taught later on, but he did understand that being with God after death was better than life. And so he's acknowledging this. He goes, it would be better for me just to die and be with God. And this would be over.
Paul did the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So then he kind of gets to he addresses his friends. He goes in 14, to the one in despair, kindness should come from his friends. I mean, he really let's call it what it is. He goes, even if he forsakes the fear of the Almighty, my brothers have been as treacherous as a seasonal stream, and as the riverbeds of the intermittent streams that flow away. They are dark because of ice. Snow is piled up over them. This whole idea of this seasonal stream thing, it kind of goes back to one of the terms used in there is called wadi. And that is a stream that during the big rainy season, it rains and it's flowing. The minute the rain stops, it completely dries up. So when you need it the most, it's useless. And that's what he's comparing his friends to, or Eliphaz to. When I need you the most, you're useless to me because you have not done nothing to help me out here. Yeah, it is harsh. Well, he deserved it. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what he's saying here. What's also funny is, and he goes on to say, when Job was prosperous, his friends were all right there. Now that he's not, now that he's an outcast because of the disease that he has on him, where are they? It's pretty telling. For now, and this is 21, you have become like these streams that are no help. You see a terror and are afraid. So Job even calls out how they are. So he understands the fear that they're dealing with here. And what's interesting through all of this, Job never asked them for one thing. Never did. Yet his friends thought it was important to them to come and share, through all of this. I'm going to hurry up and finish this so we can go pray. He goes in 24, teach me, and I, for my part, will be silent. Explain to me how I have been mistaken. How painful are honest words, but what does your reproof prove? Do you intend to criticize mere words and treat the words of a despairing man as wind? Yes, you would gamble for the fatherless and auction off your friend. So Job is tired of the insinuations of Eliphaz, and he's calling him out on them. He wants honest criticism, but he wants it done in the right way. And he's actually calling out, what was my sin? What did I do? If this is what happened, what did you see in my life that was wrong? And he doesn't get a word. He doesn't get anything from them.
It's like they feel he's contagious, and if I get too close to you, this is going to get me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I'm sure at this point he probably still had the boils and things on his skin. Absolutely. So, anything else on this? Because Job has one more thing to say. in chapter 7. So we'll finish that next week. But so what are some things that we can learn from this so far? Which is probably going to be repeated 9 times.
Think before you speak.
Think before you speak.
Measure everything against scripture and law.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Say measure everything you do or hear against scripture and law.
Yeah.
Give it all to God.
Yeah.
See conversations and what you do here.
Yeah, but just be careful. Be careful in the wisdom that you think that you have for somebody else who's going through something that maybe you have no clue on. Kind of like we go through things so we can understand maybe how to comfort someone else in that situation. You know, these guys had no clue, which we'll clearly get to. Okay. Any prayer requests?